allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Governor, would you like me to call the roll?
I would.
Governor,
Present. Here.
Commissioner,
Here.
I'm nervous though, Brenna didn't stop me on the way in and
I
double
know.
papers.
I was nervous about it too. I had to double check with Karen.
Let him keep the wrong ones.
Susie and I
Yeah, she
covered
spent
that this
5
morning.
minutes in my book, yeah.
Yeah, we had covert operations earlier.
You're all the files in there right now.
We have Deanna.
Deanna, you're up.
I can hear you. Hopefully you can hear me.
We can.
Okay. I don't have, I guess I didn't get the agenda printed out. So if, were we starting with East Central
Yes,
or
ma'am.
with, okay,
Easton, I'll read them off in order.
perfect. So East Central was requesting $8.5 million towards a $34 million project. This project is eligible for $2,840,000 of loan forgiveness under the Emerging Contaminants program of the bill funding. And what they're going to do with this money is expanding the drinking water treatment capacity at the City of Hillsborough Water Treatment Plant. This will provide iron and manganese removal through the filtration and reverse osmosis technology at that water treatment plant. And the East Central Regional Water District uses the or purchases the water from the City of Hillsborough. They've requested a 30-year loan term. The average annual payment of the net loan will be $244,000. And this water district encompasses half of Grand Forks County, Trail County, and Eastern Steel. And based on that information, the advisory committee recommended approval of this loan.
So move.
Second. Discussion. Roll call.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes. The next one
And I
up is
guess-
City of,
I should point out, they did also get an emerging contaminants grant under another EPA program that's not run by the SRF. So in case you're wondering, that other $8 million is also through EPA program that's run through DEQ, but not under the SRF. So quite a nice package that they got there.
the second one is City of Mandan drinking water.
And the city of Mandan has requested $4.5 million towards an $11.2 million project. They are going to be receiving $6.7 million of cost share from the Department of Water Resources. They've requested a 20-year loan term towards this water treatment plant phase 3 optimization project. Their average annual payment will be $270,000. They have raised their rates already in anticipation of this project and other projects that they have. As of January 1st, 2025, they do combine their water and sewer funds together. And based on that information, the advisory committee recommended approval of this project.
So move.
Second. Discussion. Roll call.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor,
Yes.
Okay, then
The ones, yeah, City of Ashley.
Then just a memo with 5 loans that were approved that were below the $2 million amount that needed the Industrial Commission approval. So Ashley, 2 Colfax, Mandan, and Portland. And if you have any questions on any of those loans, I'd be happy to answer those.
Anyone? We're good. Thank you, Deanne. Well, wait, you have a legislative update.
Right. I won't spend too much time on our appropriation bill. Others can speak to that since we're a small piece of that. House Bill 1537, the Water Service Protection Agreement. I had sent this to Karen before I left, but the governor probably remembers signing that on the 21st. So that was taken care of, and it works well for our agency. House Bill 1577, which is wastewater infrastructure grant program, that was sent back to the Senate, and I checked this morning and there's been no action, or excuse me, it's been returned to the House, and there's been no action on that, but that has been amended to assist the communities that lost their BRIC grants. And that's where that sits at this point in time. And I checked on the storm or the DES budget, and it looks like their appropriations bill, budget bill was sent to the governor on the 22nd, and that does include funding for the Storm Act grant and the match that they needed. So our agency will be assisting them with implementing that new revolving fund program. And then I looked at those that impacted the legacy fund earnings, and I see they're still working on those. So that is the update of the bills that I've been tracking, and trying to track a few others as from a distance, and we'll see how things wrap up.
Any questions? Nope. Thank you, Deanne.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
You're up, Nathan.
All right. First item on the agenda is an order that Mark's been intimately involved in for the entire duration, so I'm going to let him present that, and then I'll follow up with the other items on the agenda.
Yes, we brought order number 33526. It's an administrative complaint action of the Industrial Commission versus Cochlear Ventures LLC, requesting the imposition of civil penalties and recovery of investigative costs. Little background on April 12, 2024, we commenced this action by filing a complaint against Cochlear Ventures LLC. They did provide an informal response on April 25th, 24, but they did not file a formal answer to the complaint. There was a pre-hearing conference scheduled for January 6, 2025, in front of the administrative law judge, and Cochlear Ventures did not appear at that pre-hearing conference. So the ALJ granted the motion for recommended default judgment. Very briefly, they have 2 disposal wells in northwest North Dakota, and they are commercial disposal wells. They're required to be bonded at $100,000 on a $100,000 bond. They were originally permitted and began operating under a $50,000 commercial bond, but we increased that a number of years ago, and they failed to increase their bond to $100,000. And on one of the wells, they had a spill. They failed to report within 24 hours. And they let it sit there for a while and didn't respond with appropriate resources to clean that spill up. The administrative law judge found that the facts and allegations contained in the complaint are admitted and true due to their failure to answer. And so the order requires them to pay a civil penalty in the amount of $233,600 for the violations listed. Also award the commission $349.69 in investigatory costs and expenses.
So move.
Second. Discussion. Are they still operating?
They're essentially not operating anymore.
Roll call.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General.
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
All right, the next item on the agenda that we have is it's that non-completion waiver. So it's not a decision that we've brought forth today, but merely a topic that we've been thinking about. This was implemented back in March of 2020, post-COVID in a much different price environment, significantly lower. But there's some material in your binder, and these are just documents from March of 2020, so there's nothing new there, but these are documents outlining a procedure for non-completion waivers. DMR is watching the current price environment and attempting to stay in contact with operators regarding the lower prices lately. So if that pricing continues to deteriorate, it's likely that we'll come to a commission meeting with the recommendation of a non-completion waiver, which is in the state right now, we have an operator has 12 months from drilling to the date that they have to complete the well. And what this would allow them to do is to not have a timeline on that completion process. But again, it's highly related to oil price, and we're going to continue to watch this for a month. A few weeks back, we were thinking about bringing this to the commission this month, but decided against that and just watched the volatile price environment that we're in right now. We run from $60 to $65 on any given day. It seems like, and in the last 12 months, we've been from $60 to $85 a barrel. So it's been a pretty volatile market, and I think the idea or the hope is that it settles down after companies understand what the impacts of tariffs are on their businesses, and sanctions, and OPEC start to kind of figure out the balance of 304 million barrels a day across the globe. So again, it would seek to extend the duration of that time frame, and we would probably, if we brought it back as a recommendation, we would probably tie it to a consistent oil price for some period of time, which essentially with the goal of keeping rigs in the air in North Dakota and not allowing them to have to spend that money on completion if they didn't choose to do that. So it was done, like I said, in 2020, 2021, and it really drove this high drilled but uncompleted inventory up, which was worked down over time. So that's really more of an FYI for the commission that we're thinking through that. Any questions?
When we do it, or when we did it before, this is probably unfair to you.
Might be.
Like, you'll get the royalty owners or working interest owners or people that are like frustrated with it. But what we care about is, one, keeping the human resource available, and two, not standing down rigs moving to the Permian or somewhere else.
Yeah, I think
Is
there
there,
has to be
it,
some,
I hope we don't have to make this decision.
right.
But if we do, do we have any kind of communication plan or messaging plan? And then the second part of that question is, if we have to make this decision, is there a better time of year to do it for companies to better pre-plan? So the last thing we want to do is do this and then still have 5 rigs stacked up.
Yeah, I would say both those questions were thought through very well in the last time that it was brought up, making sure that they could get past frost laws and the time that the permit is open. What else, Mark?
Yeah, so the last time we implemented this, it was, there was a press release put out by, I believe, the commission's office, and might have been by our agency also. It also was posted on our website. We had discussions with the Petroleum Council, so it was widely distributed. We ended up with a number of drilled but uncompleted or duck wells that were a result of that. And when we decided to take it off, not renew the waiver anymore, we communicated that to the operators, and then gave them a grace period. We didn't put a line in the sand, so to speak, of when they had to have done. We worked with them And it took us a while to get through those, but of course, it's from the state perspective, and it's nice to bring on those wells on production when the oil price is high rather than low and get that increased benefit from that initial production.
Yeah, the idea that,
Well, we did hear from particularly working consumers that were frustrated with that policy because they have to spend the money to drill the well, but they're not going to see that return. They'll start to do, so we are cognizant of that also.
Yeah, we don't like the duck number going up.
right,
But we like the number of holes being punched going down even less.
yeah, we don't want less rigs running right now, so. Yeah, the good communication plan, I think, is important, specifically around the understanding that those working interest owners pay their proportionate share, but don't get any revenue coming off that, so, for production. That, it's kind of an FYI for now, to let you all know that we're watching prices very closely.
What's your rough math on price before we have to really think about doing this?
Well, Justin will give the number.
It's also a
but,
cardiogram.
It's like we got like $7 deduct, North Dakota deduct right now. So I think if you get the North Dakota price into the mid 50s, you have to really start thinking through that for a substantial amount of time. The idea is that we don't want companies to make the decision to drop rigs prior to this.
Yeah.
We would rather be out ahead of that, and that's why we're kind of planting that seed right now. So we can be out ahead of that. And it's hard to say that, you know, every company's financed slightly differently. They have different NRIs and you know, numbers. So that number is different for everybody. But I've watched break-even prices across all major basins of the United States for years. You know, the Bakken has generally been in that $60 range. So, but again, longer laterals are more efficient, more effective, lower costs, you know, better capital efficiency. Those type of things help that. So I don't absolutely know the answer to that question. So that's that. Next is the legislative update. You'll have, I'm sorry, it's getting passed out right now. You'll have the normal spreadsheet that I've submitted each time for the last 3 months. Nothing too different on that. I'll point out the bottom of the first page is those focus bills that we're really focused on. Senate Bill 2014 is, of course, the NDIC and the DMR budget. It is probably being voted on the House floor as we speak. I think it's going on right now. So it passed House appropriations in a state that we're pleased with and allows us to continue the level of service to the industry in the state of North Dakota that we have in years past. So the other is the critical minerals bill, which is House Bill 1459. And at this point, that's a study and a kind of a public policy in its current state. Then the more recent one is Senate Bill 2397 that we're very focused on. I've highlighted those that I've outlined on the memo page, but this recently came into play, and it's a tax incentive for a limited number of development incentive wells to help promote innovation and technological advancements. The objective, I think, is to kind of flatten out the decline curve, if not increase production in North Dakota by finding alternate or undeveloped resources in laterals and help continue strong oil production in the state of North Dakota. But that is actively being discussed and worked on. And we're involved and have a seat at the table with that. So I think it in the most recent form is in a pretty decent spot.
The definitions have tightened up, you're saying?
Yeah, there's been some sideboards put on. So it can't necessarily be implemented across every well in the state. There's a limited number of wells. So in the memo, I definitely point out it's a limited number of wells. So language is tightened up a little bit. And I think it's still appealing for industry. Continues to promote the resources in North Dakota and it's something that North Dakota should be pleased with to continue to help promote those technologies that should keep oil production up, or attempt to, for well into the future. That's it. 3 main bills that we're still following really close. A few others. But.
Probably before you leave, so I was in DC 2 weeks ago and met with a bunch of Republican members of Congress. And when they're talking about what reconciliation looks like, I kind of put on them that, you know, it's politically convenient to get rid of all the IRA tax credits. Like, that's a very easy political lie. The problem is some of those IRA tax credits got us parity with PTC and Repower. And what I push them on pretty hard is 45Q having parity on capture and EOR.
Yeah.
And so got some interest for some people who understand this stuff. Harriet Hageman from DC. And so I know there's at least a conversation going on about giving parity on 45Q if it survives, which would make everybody's life a lot easier if we're trying to figure out how we keep barrels of production up.
Yep.
So,
$3.
who knows what'll happen in Congress, but
Yeah.
at least it was more receptive than I thought it would probably be.
Yeah. The other thing that's been added to that 2397 is kind of a date, a sunset, more of a sunset date. So it's working great. We can extend it if it's not working. Didn't accomplish what it was intended to do. So I think it's in.
That's a little like the reef rack, right? I mean, that might come into play, but it
Refract
hasn't been used
doesn't have a
much.
sunset on
No, but it hasn't been used much.
it. Right. I would say refracts, in my opinion, are down the list on. You know, they'll high grade all their projects typically, and refracts are probably down the list of ways. So they're continuing to develop primary production in the middle block and upper Three Forks.
What you're aware of is it's still 36 months, 300,000 barrels.
Correct. Yep.
They didn't change it.
That number hasn't been changed. I could say the number of eligible wells is limited, and probably in the range of 100 to 150 that wells that would be eligible for it total in the state of North Dakota.
Quite a big jump though, 24 months, 36. I think some original numbers, 70, 80, 90,000,
Yeah.
arbitrarily jumped up to 300.
Yeah, I think House Bill 1483, or the original language for that, had 90,000. Actually crept up based on
Nothing.
data, probably some data, but
Thank you.
for sure. That was all we had. Thank you.
Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
It's like,
Well, that'd be a lot more livable. But, yeah. Hey, Justin.
Hi, Justin.
Yeah, good afternoon. We are in the afternoon. So this afternoon, typically we may have been able to go a few months before any major things were changing on the gas transmission side, but things are moving very, very quickly. And so I thought it was important to get in front of the commission again here and just provide you some updates. There's some new projects and new project details that I didn't have available last month. And so we will get moving right along here. I'm going to advance to, it would be page 4, or slide 4 on page 2. So no major changes on the WBI proposed Bakken East project as we speak. They're currently working with potential customers, continuing those discussions. Timelines on this particular project, I think everyone, for all projects, are targeting kind of mid-year for some decisions to be made about who's in and who's out, at what capacities, what the timelines look like. I would say broadly, all of the projects, it appears that there's some timeline creep going on, that we're about a year pushing things back. It seems like the end users for the power generation or those industrial facilities, they weren't going to be able to meet some of the original timelines they had of 2028, 2029. So it's looking like late 2029 for any of the projects I'm talking about, whether it's Bakken East or on the following slide 5, the Intensity Infrastructure Partners project. So with that, what is new on this slide 5 is the phase 2 component. This was an open season that was launched last week by Intensity Infrastructure. If you remember, their original proposal was just the western half of that system. They're now putting out in the marketplace the opportunity to continue all the way to Cass County. Castleton is where the open season documentation terminated. But certainly if there were parties on or off of this path to alter it, all projects typically have that flexibility built into them that they can move as the market pushes them. So that open season runs until May 23rd. You can see some of the initial proposed details. A lot of times when these open seasons go out, it's their best guess at what the market might need. It will readjust from there, whether it's pipe size, capacities, and mileage and route typically get altered through a series of iterations with potential customers. So you can see the timeline on there, also targeting that January 2030 in service. And so these two projects now, whereas before Bakken East and the Intensity project were competing on the western half head-to-head, they're now competing against each other full path now all the way to eastern North Dakota. But with that, there are some considerations, that certainly the commission will stay on top of. Same customers that they're all talking to, and whether or not there's going to be 2 pipes, 1 pipe, whether any type of collaboration yet to be determined of what that's going to potentially look like. Again, the encouraging thing that I would say is that there's clearly a need for a project. The companies don't just go forward with projects like this and put this effort out without seeing a need in the marketplace for a project of these type of scale and scope. So very encouraging. It's just the details now. It's going to take a little while before we have any type of certainty in the marketplace which route they want to go. The other project that was announced this week, I mentioned it to the commission last fall. It was just being talked about, which was enhancing our ability to move gas to and from storage in the Williston Basin. So you can see this open season, which was launched on Wednesday, will run until May 20th of this year for 72,000 decatherms per day of new firm capacity in and out of natural gas storage in the Baker storage field in the southwest corner of the Williston Basin. What that will do, what it will require is not only upgrades in the storage field itself, and so there's a number of wells that they'll then enhance, horsepower, well connectivity, as well as pipeline enhancements from that Baker storage field to what they call their manning station, which is shown with the star there, which would tie into their Bakken East proposed project as well. So they're not they're mutually exclusive in that one could happen without the other, but they are kind of designed to work hand in hand with the storage component for end users as well as the pipeline system tying into it. This has been important, I think, as we've seen a lot of weather disruptions over the last handful of years. We've seen how fragile sometimes the industry can get during extreme events. So having that firm ability to move higher volumes of gas in and out of storage is critical during those for downstream users in particular that have to have systems running, whether they're serving communities, whether they're running facilities. Having that redundancy is, I've always been a big advocate for it. All the pricing details and terms are on there. Again, it's a standalone project, but would tie into their Bakken East. Any questions on any of those new projects before I continue forward? And so we talked about this a bit at the last meeting, which were some of the considerations and benefits to a broader portion of the state. than what some of those pipeline routes would originally suggest. And so the commission, as we continue to move forward, if there is a role in the future for the commission to play the pipeline authority in one of these projects, our ability to connect into these other systems, the implication of each system and how it would interact with some of our legacy pipeline systems in the state, I think is something we need to keep in mind. And why I say that, I put just a generic pipeline route, not to say it was going to be Bakken East or Intensity, just a generic route from the Underwood area to Fargo, and potential interconnects with the legacy WBI system. So one thing that potential shippers on either one of those systems is going to have to look at is, you'll hear me talk about rate stacking. What that means is when you have two different pipeline operators, you find yourself in an environment, if it's Intensity that builds the project, in order to have an interconnect and serve additional gas towards Devil's Lake or along the I-94 corridor, you have what's known as rate stacking, where the 80 cents on the Intensity project, then you stack on another 40 cents for transportation on the WBI system. If it is a WBI system, the way they're designing it, it would be part of their integrated system. So that 85 cents, even though in that scenario, higher transportation, you wouldn't be exposed to that rate stacking component. That also becomes important as we look at potentially taking capacity towards the Viking pipeline on WBI. So there would be another rate stacking opportunity there if it was on a non-WBI system. So those are things that in the coming months, as the commission looks at needs and opportunities, that we start to consider all of these factors in overall costs and not just looking at $1 figure on transportation and available funding for that. So the other thing I wanted to take a few minutes, the timelines, as I mentioned, summertime will be a critical window for all of these projects to have folks signing up. I don't know that we'll see binding open seasons. We potentially could. Those are not going to be a requirement for projects to move forward, but they will need binding commitments in or outside of a formal open season process. And then the second half of this year, that will begin a lot of the right-of-way work. WBI has started some of the right-of-way work with potential landowners, and so some of that work is underway as we speak. The other thing, this is for the commission, the staff, the general public, everyone that has an interest in here, just so everyone is kind of use this as a glossary of terms and things that I think might be helpful as we move forward. These are just some definitions. You'll hear me talk a lot in the coming months about tariffs, asset management arrangements, AMAs, capacity releases. We can dig into any one of these, but I wanted to just make sure that you and your teams had these handy as we look for that. The other key thing that you'll hear me talk about a lot is the reservation rate, also known as the demand charge, and that is the actual fee that's charged by those companies for transportation on those systems. And that's the major piece. And then as we really get into the weeds on some of these transportation costs, the reservation charge is the largest piece for our consideration. We have a commodity charge, which is only charged if gas is physically moved. And there's some fuel and other charges, electricity on top of that. So I wanted to make sure that on slide 14, there's an example breakdown so that everyone's clear and that there's no surprises out there of what these charges look like in those discussions. Slide 15 is looking at the current budget bill that's on the House floor here this afternoon. The current version of it, currently up until this session, the Pipeline Authority and the Commission had $30 million per year in its toolbox in order to take on capacity to support a project. The current amendment was to move that up to $60 million per year. And so you can see the volume on the left-hand axis where the state and where the commission would be able to participate should it to see a need and decide to do so. So you're somewhere in that 90,000 decatherms in today's scenario to around 180,000 decatherms going forward. So if you think about those projects, the Bakken East was a 760,000 decatherm per day project. The state would be able to participate under this new 60 million per year scenario if that's what gets voted through. 180,000 of that. So you can kind of see the proportion of the commission's ability there.
So Justin.
Yep.
With respect to that, we're only buying down or buying capacity. Do we have any latitude, or is there any latitude to address the reservation rate? Because there's another component to this, as you pointed out. That's the other charge along with this. We're just buying capacity?
Just combine capacity at that reservation rate. So that the reservation, yep. Yep. And so that bottom portion of this axis is that reservation rate. So you see kind of that spectrum,
okay.
80 cents to 90 cents.
Referring to,
Yep.
Okay.
And so this is just a really simplified, I just picked some random numbers when this case was made of just what that would look like. Obviously, the state would not be the major shipper on an overall system. In this example, the state would be 80,000 of that 400,000 decatherms. And you can see what that, you have to come up with a precedent agreement, negotiate a rate, and then at some point in time, we'll start talking about what's known as a max rate, which is what the pipeline company has to do for FERC. That becomes important when the commission and the pipeline authority look to release their capacity to the other parties. So I've tried to outline what I envision as the most desirable and least desirable scenarios for the commission and the pipeline authority going forward. If the commission takes a capacity position, I think the most desirable that I would advocate is for permanent release scenario where up to all of the capacity that is acquired gets released at greater than 1 year. In a perfect scenario, indefinitely. The state would be off the hook. Second most desirable would be that you're releasing capacity in less than 1 year terms. If you can't get a full year release or longer, state law does allow us to do anything greater than 1 month. So FERC has some different sets of criteria for between 1 month and a year that we would have to apply to that scenario. Third option, the state is unable to release some or all of its capacity, then look to hire an asset manager who uses that capacity to monetize as much or all of that value in that pipeline space to minimize any fiscal impact to the state. And the worst scenario, if everyone sat on their hands and did nothing, the state would be obligated to pay those charges. FERC thankfully has this pretty clearly lined out of how parties, and so the state would be looked at just as a shipper, just like any other shipper. They have very clear terms of what it looks like when you release capacity. They have very clear expectations and requirements of how you manage that. So 31 days or less, that doesn't apply right now. There was no amendment to change that. State can't do anything on a daily basis. So for 1 month to a year, there's a process in place. There's a bidding requirement that goes on the pipeline company's website. It goes out for bid to release that chunk of capacity. You can have rollovers. So there's a whole set of criteria. And then in the ideal scenario, anything greater than 1 year releases, and very clear at FERC, has to be done at max tariff rate. So that is a rate that they've already agreed to. No bidding required, and you can roll that over as long as you continue to do it at that max rate that FERC had already approved. So, and then again, just some more example scenarios that you and your team can take a peek at. But again, getting the cart before the horse a little bit here before we decide if there's a role to play or not. And then lastly, we'll just leave this, the gas storage. I don't think we need to dive into that unless there's questions on it, but this is just an update for you and your team, what's happening in that storage field. So a lot of space for that project that was mentioned earlier. So with that, are there any questions on this or anything else that I can help out with this afternoon?
The fact that we have two companies looking to build a pipeline all the way into Cass County, right? When competition says that there's definitely a need for it. Is that competition also in this space can sometimes have two people at the table and all of a sudden nobody at the table? Are we worried at all about that? I mean, there's nothing we can do to control it, but
Correct, yeah. And particularly when we're looking at that western half, I could envision a scenario where you might have two suboptimal pipes on the western half. I don't see a commercial situation where we have two pipes going all the way to Cass County. So I think there's a lot to be shuffled out with the larger users on that western segment. If there will be two pipes or one pipe, and then going east, I think that will likely come down to one pipe. But they are certainly, if I was,
but WBI doesn't need anything to go east if they decide to dump into storage.
so let me make sure I understand the question. So the storage component would be additive to that bucket east. Yeah, so kind of one doesn't rely on the other. Yeah. Any of you or your team have any questions anytime, please reach out. I'm happy to provide as much context as I can at the time. But this summer will be, again, a very active time for all of us.
Hopefully we'll have to make some good decisions.
Okay. Well, if there's nothing else, thank you.
If they just dump it, that's what happens now. I don't know.
Afternoon. Yeah. Hello, hello.
Let me governor with that. So. I found
He looks for any opportunity to do that, any one of us.
Is that what I do? Yeah.
All right, very good.
All right.
We had a bunch of kids around the table this morning, so.
Yeah, that was fun. Thank you for doing that. That was good. All right, our first order of business is consideration of approval of our B&D Smart Plan. So I'm going to set the stage for this. Go back to the prior session, the legislature enacted a study to be done on a smart plan. That was done. That's included as attachments. I'm not going to go through the attachments. Safe to say what we've come up with here is the version of that follows that study that was recommended and accepted back as a viable way to move forward. Also setting the stage, what you do have in your packet in the first page is a policy that we seek approval on. And the policy would begin to then set the stage for the Industrial Commission to consider this each year. The decisioning of this on an annual operating year basis would be at the Industrial Commission level, as it should. So, for example, if management came with a recommendation for a certain level of smart plan retention to be paid, or the tranches, you guys could reduce, expand, say no for this year, but the policy would allow us to come to you as our board for decisioning of it on an annual operating basis, which is another key part of this. The third setting stage is typically at this level, I like to, when I was in private sector work with boards and with you guys as the board for Bank of North Dakota, really stay high level summary for you. I'm going to take a little different approach here and walk pretty specifically through the key points of the memo that you do have in your packet, because I think some of these key points are really, really critical to talk and think through. So, and interrupt me at any point in time. So I'll start on the first page of the memorandum, which is the approval we're seeking for this year to actually put into place the SMART plan for the 2025 operating year. Now, the first part of this memo lays out that this is not in a vacuum at the bank. This is part of a larger strategic need that we have. I've introduced to you our transitional strategic framework where we've talked about the idea of strong banking in a volatile environment, talked about the idea of fintech, talked about the idea of talent management, talked about the idea of risk management, talked about the idea of ag and energy are so important. Those are our strategic buckets looking forward. This is a part of our talent management strategic bucket moving forward. Now, what do I mean by talent management? In the banking space and in a lot of industries, but specifically in the banking space, there's a big evolution going on in the workforce. You've got the changing demographics and the generational shift going on. You've got remote hybrid work. You've got the technological advancements. You've got all kinds of things affecting the workforce that companies are having to react to. Some of the best ones in my experience that have done this have really embraced the idea of a talent management culture. It's that culture that attracts, recruits, retains, onboards, trains, develops, provides career paths, all the way to robust succession, open and transparent succession plan. Those companies that figure that out the best, all those pieces, they are the ones that are winning the day in terms of talent management, keeping and career pathing and succeeding the best possible talent, which is absolutely critical. The second part of this in regards to our talent management is that the Bank of North Dakota is unique. And I've heard it since I got here. Some don't like that uniqueness and some do. I'm benign on it. I was hired to come in and run a $10.5 billion banking agency that needs to run as a bank for very valid business purposes. Risk management probably being me first and foremost, liquidity provision being another, protection against major credit quality events, as well as generating a nice positive return and maintaining adequate capital for all of the above. And yet the uniqueness is we're also a state agency. There's that unique part of it, but I lean into, I am competing out there with $3 billion banks, $5 billion banks, $1 billion banks, $10 billion banks, $20 billion banks for talent, not just in North Dakota, but across the nation, primarily the upper Midwest. And so, and with the complexity of banking that is continuing to evolve, so the deals are getting bigger, they're not getting smaller. The deals are getting more complex, they're not getting less complex. The risk management is becoming much more complex. You think of cybersecurity, you think of the technological advances, we haven't even stepped into AI yet. So there's a lot going on in the space, and we've got to have the absolute best business bankers, the best credit analysts, the best loan ops staff, the best tech staff, the best special asset staff. We've got to stay abreast of that in order to manage $10.5 billion in assets. So that's the importance of the talent management culture. That's why it's up on our transitional strategic framework, is because it's just that critically important. In that light, we've completed a comprehensive assessment, which is the table on page 2 in your memo. This is our analysis of the buckets in talent management and also where we're at, how we feel about it, and what's our plan moving forward. So on the left-hand side, you can see the major buckets of this are recruitment, retention, training is the second one, development's the third, succession is the fourth, and then turnover is really the ultimate measurement of how you're doing looking back. In terms of recruitment and retention, then we break it down in terms of, okay, there's base salary pay, there's incentive, there's recruitment capabilities, there's stock ownership and options and ownership, and there's benefits. Looking at us compared to those that we are competing against for this talent. And you can see moving across, so things like base salary pay. If you go back 4 or 5 years, I would say the assessment would be we were really light on base salary pay. There were a few years in there of 0% merit increases from the legislature. That kind of put it behind, so there was some catch-up needed. There's been nice catch-up done in the last couple of years from the legislature, and other things done based on competitive equity adjustments. If somebody is getting headhunted or has a job offering somewhere, so there's been some nice adjustments. Toward today, we'd say that base salary pay is light, but within the realm, so it's okay. So then the plan moving forward is to continue to keep an eye on that, essentially, since we feel like we're kind of okay. We're in the range. Incentive plan. I would challenge you to find any billion-dollar size organization out there that doesn't have one. They all do. Some of them are not very well put together. Some are really well put together, but they have them. We don't. That's a competitive disadvantage. Our recruitment capabilities are fairly adequate. However, we're going to have to advance in the technology to keep up with what's going on in the space. But that's something for the future, not an immediate need right now. Something like stock options and ownership are very common out in the space, especially for your business banker levels, your senior vice president levels, your more senior positions. We do not and will not ever have that option. It's just not on the table. Our benefits are strong. They are when that is a competitive advantage for us. So that's looking at a whole assessment of that recruitment retention piece of talent management and saying that's where we're at. The SMART plan would fit and start to fulfill in that second row category there that we are lacking in terms of a competitive advantage. In terms of training, we feel like we're adequate, but we need to continue to evolve because there's a lot of technology coming into play on training systems that are very robust. And we're getting to the point where we're going to need to really look at that. Career development, we're at a point where there's been a lot of good work done up to this point to start that career development. The introduction of a coaching culture, the introduction of individual development plans, the introduction of a succession hierarchy. Now it needs to move forward and evolve and get more robust and get tied into the other pieces of talent management. Succession it's at that phase where it's identified. And now, much like development, it needs to be rolled in and tied to the greater whole to where individual development plans are really tied to the succession so that we have a marked pathway for people that is very clear. We know exactly where they're at. And there needs to be tie-in overall to the overall strategic positioning of the bank. So, but it's in a good spot, needs further evolution. Turnover, which is the lagging indicator, it's low up to this point. And that's fantastic. I think that's great work done by the executive team up to this point. But I, as a CEO and the executive team, we have to look ahead. We've got to look ahead around the corner in terms of what is that likely to do. With the changes happening in the industry, with the changes continuing to become more difficult to garner talent and keep it, and also with our retirements that we have coming up. So if you look at the data on just the Bank of North Dakota staff, 44% of our staff are eligible for retirement in the next, I think, 10 years, staged in there. That's a big percentage. That concerns me as the CEO of the bank to look forward and say, I'm going to turn over nearly half of that staff in an environment that is increasing in complexity and risk profile and everything else. So there is my concern on that. So I want to set that stage for you that this is part of the greater strategic area that we're looking at. So then on page 3, I'll shift over to, okay, what are we looking at then for a SMART plan? And it starts out with the mission. And words really matter here. So I've 25 years in private banking, working for multiple billion-dollar size organizations, some public, some private, down in Texas, up in North Dakota. I've seen a lot of incentive plans. I really have. Some work really well, and some really don't work well. So you got to be very, very careful with how you craft these things. This is mimicking something that I recently crafted in the industry that worked very, very well. And there's some key concepts around it, and they're underlined in that mission statement. It will motivate staff behaviors. And some of the worst crafted ones have not stated that they're going to be motivational. And so, for example, you might get a plan that you set your goals so high that nobody ever hits them in 10 years. It actually becomes demotivational. So we want it to be a motivational plan. We want it to align with our bank strategy. So those that we lay out, that strong banking, that talent management, that agriculture and energy, that risk management, that fintech, those things that we're talking about and looking at moving forward, we need to align the incentive plan to accomplish those strategies because we need all of our staff aligned to accomplish those strategies. We want it competitive, yet fiscally responsible. We're going to pay for it as we go. And I'll show you as we get to the end here, we actually show improved net profit earned by the bank as a result of this plan. So it's not a net cost to the organization. Disciplined, sustainable, easily understood. Some of the worst incentive plans I've ever seen are those that are so complex that nobody understands it. Again, it becomes demotivational. So it has to be easily understood, tied to your strategy, motivational, realistic targets. And the best ones I've seen, they prioritize team over the individual. I've seen tremendous amount of individual plans where you get individualized performance. So you'll get a great amount of one thing, and everything else will suffer. If you include it as one team, we get there together, or we don't get there together, but we get there, we will be together doing it, sorry. That is much more powerful, and we're seeing better results out there in the industry on these team-based plans. So that's what this is. That's our mission statement. The team part of it means that the percentage that can be possibly earned, the target percentage, is the same for every staff in the organization, whether you're the janitor or the CEO. As part of that one team concept, we will fulfill our strategies, we will accomplish our goals, we will manage our risk, we will return our net profit, we will exceed those, and we'll either accomplish all that as a team, or if we miss, we will suffer the results of that as a team. And I'll show you that as we go through. Sorry, I'm just taking a breath here. I'm talking a lot.
Acceptable.
Acceptable.
Unacceptable?
Acceptable. The next section on page 4 is where we're going to start getting into how we specifically tie this to the bank strategies looking forward. And I've been saying this since I got here in every legislative session and conversations with you guys, is our mission at its highest level is to promote North Dakota agriculture, commerce, and industry. That's great. That mission hasn't changed for 106 years. However, how we fulfill on that mission changes and evolves. And currently how we fulfill on it is we first and foremost manage risk, because the environment's crazy. It is. I mean, we all know it. Just the sheer jump in regulation alone per administration is incredibly damaging to the banking industry, and it increases the risk profile. The technological advancement, there's so much opportunity, but there's so many increases in risk profiles as a result. Our first and foremost duty is to protect the fiduciary deposits that are entrusted with us. The state entrusts those with the bank. We have to keep those deposits safe and sound. Now we have to put them at risk in loans and other things in order to earn the return. But that's why we're first and foremost risk managers, is because we have to keep those deposits safe and sound and liquid, which is what we do. And we've done that very well for 105 years. But the environment is changing. And I know I've been like a broken record coming in and saying that, but it is changing a lot, specifically in banking. Human beings are rethinking and changing the way that they want financial transactions handled. My sons, they have a small business. They have savings accounts. They're in college. They've got auto loans. Their dad has been the CEO of a bank for many, many years. They've never stepped foot in a bank to handle banking business. They've handled it all through their apps. They've never needed to step into a bank. That's how much it's changing, because the human being behavior is changing. That's why the banking industry is moving into the fintech space, because they're following their customers moving into the fintech space in a big way. So that change is increasing that risk profile. And another reason is why we're so focused on managing risk, because we see it at a high level. The second part of our mission is to maintain sufficient liquidity. So if you go back to 2015, when oil prices tanked and went down, we were able to sell $2 billion out of our securities portfolio, and nobody even really knew about it. But we sold it to put liquidity into the state system so that all the transactions could keep going. And then, of course, there was a special session with more dividends from the bank, and that's all fine and great. But the big number is the $2 billion in securities. That's why we carry $4 billion in securities today, is to maintain that liquidity. So if oil goes to 40 and stays there, or we don't move the gas and all of a sudden oil production goes down, or something else happens that the state revenues go down, we have $4 billion in liquidity that we can quietly insert into the system so that the financial transactions are able to continue. That's how we protect the deposit base of the state of North Dakota and her citizens. So maintaining sufficient liquidity is a big piece of that. Then, and only then, do we support North Dakota economic development and growth. Here are all of our programs, our partnership with our core banks, our legislative directed programs, things like that. And then at the end of that, we generate a return. And we pay interest expense on deposits to the state, and we generate net income. And that's roughly about $350, $400 million a year. Now, I went through that in so much detail because what I'm laying out here is when you look on page 5 at our performance target and the buckets that we are trying to motivate behaviors here on, they are lined up with risk management, liquidity provision, economic development, and return. providing. You can see credit quality, actually, enterprise risk management, ERM, is a system that we use for just what it says, enterprise risk management. All of the risk of the organization quantified up to a manageable level so we can see what it's doing. And I mean every risk. Physical security risk, cybersecurity risk, credit risk, liquidity risk, interest rate risk itself, economic value of equity risk, all types of risk flow up through the enterprise risk management system. Credit quality is such an important risk for us that we actually are recommending that we pull it out and make it the first. So we're actually double dipping in terms of risk management. Credit quality is the first bucket at 25%. Enterprise risk management is the second one at 25%. Then financial performance, and then mission and strategy. So there is the tie to our strategies and our mission. And I just want to take some time to really lay that out because it's a critical piece of making sure that this is motivational and it drives improved performance in the right direction that we want it to go for the Bank of North Dakota. You can see here another key aspect is that there is a range. So our target payout scale would be hitting those metrics in those categories that we want. That would pay out at a 15% level. If we did better than that, 110% of target, we pay 16.5, and there'd be a cap on that. If we hit below 90% on all these categories, so for example, we have a major credit quality event and our credit ratios go up and stay up where we don't want them, that would take us potentially below 90%. That is a bottom. That's a zero payout below that 90%. And that's important to have that for accountability and discipline to the system. The following pages are just the various buckets and categories and what ratios that we chose to put in there to measure those. Say, for example, credit quality, the best ratios are adversely classified asset to total loans, non-performing loans, classified loans. Those are the best indicators of how our loan portfolio is performing overall. You can see enterprise risk management, financial performance. Now in financial performance on page 7, we've introduced this idea of total return. And because we've introduced it, we are putting it right into the SMART plan. Which is not only our net income, but the net income plus any interest expense we pay on deposits to the state, because that is returned to the state shareholders as well. That's that total return. And what we said is if that's what we're striving for, then that's what we're going to put in the SMART plan to go accomplish. And the final one, mission and strategy. This is the one where it's subjective to a certain extent because you want to maintain some subjectivity in this for executive management to sometimes smooth the edges or sometimes consider anecdotal or one-time events that have occurred that you just could not think of when you were planning a plan for the year and make some slight adjustments. The subjectivity is very minor in this overall, the much smaller percent. We have quantified the vast majority of these metrics to measure up. Kind of wrapping up here in terms of page 8, this is an example of where this is a retention and a recruitment plan. It actually is not even an incentive plan comparable to other banks out there, but it comes close. This is a retention recruitment where, and you can see this, a typical employee earning $75,000 a year, and I'm on the bottom of page 8. Over a 5-year period, if that earned percentage achieved was anywhere from, averaging 14%, then in those years, they would earn that percentage on their base salary, but they would not get paid that amount. They get paid a third of that amount. 2/3 of it goes into a future kitty. And then that builds and that stacks. So you can see in year 2, they get the second portion of their year 1, and they get the first portion of their year 2 accomplishment. If in one of those years it drops below the 90% is zeroed out, then there's just their first year chunk of that stacks in there. Another key thing is that if an employee leaves, say in year 2, they give up all that future stacked accrual there. And so there is the retention piece of that. It's a 3-year payout, and if any point employee leaves, they lose what they accrued, but not yet fulfilled on actually getting paid on it.
Back going to handcuffs.
Yes. Yeah. Page 9. We give an example of, and this is where on that piece of making sure it's fiscally responsible, you're our board of directors. We look at it as the legislative chambers are our shareholders. You guys are our independent board of directors along with the advisory board and we're executive management.
That's what we call them too.
Yes.
Our shareholders.
Yes.
That's not what they call us.
So we feel it's incumbent on us to prove to you as the board that we pay for this as we go, that we get improved results on this as we go. You can see looking back 2020 through 2024, you can see the average amount on this would be about 1.9 million paid out to the staff over that 5-year period, or about 1.13% of annual earnings. We actually, so if we don't accomplish any $1 better than what we budgeted for this year or next year, it would cost 1.13% of earnings, something that's very absorbable by the Bank of North Dakota. However, we do believe, and we feel pretty strongly about this, that even this year, we're going to easily improve net income overall by more than $1.9 million as a result of the alignment to our strategies that I've been talking about in so much detail with you. So we actually believe this is accretive earnings. And I've actually seen plans crafted like this with these specificities be very, very accretive earnings in the organizations that I've overseen them on. So I've seen this work. And finally, and then I'll open up to questions here or anything Lori or Rob might have to add. The rollout of this is very, very critical. So again, I just want to leave you with, this is team-based. This is for all the staff, from the janitor to the CEO. We're all on one team. We get there together, but we're going to be together doing it. That's very powerful in terms of a performance culture. And it's very powerful in terms of the tellers behind the teller line having a chance at the same percentage as the CEO of the organization. The goals in this align with our strategic plan. I can't overemphasize that. There's no point to do this unless it helps accomplish our strategies, and that we believe our strategies are of the utmost importance for the Bank of North Dakota, and they are, and they do. Including the key risk indicators in here that line up to our mission, it ties every staff member's role. So every time they come to work every morning and go, okay, I'm fulfilling my job. Our job is to make sure they understand how their job ties up to the strategies and how they tie into accomplishment or not accomplishment of the SMART plan. There is the power in performance culture. That is where this really becomes powerful, is when we make it a part of every staff member's daily lives. And I've seen that really, really have good results. And the final key piece is, just like real life, there are things that occur in the banking industry and to the Bank of North Dakota that we have no control over. There are disasters that come up. There are rate shocks that kill margin. There are major credit quality events you just can't foresee. There's some things that are outside of our control, my control, your control, our staff's control, that are going to happen moving forward that might take us below that 90% and zero it out. Every staff member would be zeroed out, even though they were given 110%. Their team did great, they did great, but we were affected by some external events. It gets zeroed out. Welcome to banking. Welcome to real life. So if we're going to share in the reward, we're going to share in the risk as well. Part of that being one team. We're one team for all the positive things, and we're also one team for all the negative things. And that's powerful from a cultural standpoint. Extremely, extremely powerful. So that is what I have. I would recommend approval on both of these. And Lori, Rob, anything that I missed? I'm sorry, that was a lot of hearing from me, I know.
It was good though.
Yeah,
It was good.
there's a lot
And the
of,
materials are good.
stuff in here. A lot of targets. I like the fact that it's a stretch goal, but it is attainable, and it does change behavior. Gets people focusing in the right areas, and yet not missing our mission. We did something similar in the insurance industry, maybe not as many areas that you're focused on, but that's all right. There's a lot of things to watch here, so I guess with that, I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second that.
Discussion?
I have a question on the motion. Don, you were recommending approval of both of these items. Could you clarify?
Yes, so, and you may want to take them as separate. I'll leave that up to you. The first is the policy we would ask to be accepted to set the stage for the Industrial Commission to annually approve or annually decision the SMART plan recommendations from executive management. And that's the way we kind of wrote it here in broad language. And then that would then allow us each year to come in and say, for this operating year, here's the specific SMART plan we're putting in for this year. And we'll report back to you on how it's improving operations or where we missed on something. So those would be so one is the more permanent, the other is on a year by year basis,
Okay, and this is for fiscal year.
2025.
So like, go ahead.
Oh, no, you go first.
Okay. Sorry about that. I was just gonna say, listening to it, it's very transparent. I want to compliment you and your teams with this. It's very transparent. It's very accountable as you go through. And the last piece, when you started that, it's just because it's so common around government. When you started the last piece, I thought you were going to have something in there about, well, if things go to hell in a handbasket and we have no control over it, we still benefit. I really did. That's not a comment on you. It's the way that it goes. The way that it goes. This is, I'll stop there. I think it's very transparent. It's got accountability built in there. I think you've incentivized conduct, and I won't be surprised if this doesn't start getting noticed by other places around the government. I commend the team for what you put together. Looks really good.
Thank you.
Every new hire will know this has to be reapproved annually. I think you have unique advantages to being a state bank. You also have unique disadvantages in that your shareholders and your board of directors are elected people. And I appreciate that fact because I think it matters a lot. And I also appreciate the fact that it's a team effort. It's not one section versus another section. And that the bonuses are designed to retain employees, but also my personal opinion is designed in a way to recognize that you are unique because you still answer to a political body. So. Roll call.
So the motion is to approve the policy as presented, which provides for an annual review of the recruitment and retention plan, and to approve the specific metrics for fiscal year 2025.
Correct.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Well done.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yes. Yes.
No, they saw the legislature. So no.
All right. So what I thought I'd do. We're ready? All right. What I thought I'd do is Kelvin put together a nice summary of where kind of for Bank of North Dakota and our budget. I would walk through that and then I turn to Kelvin for anything. So our budget, part of the Industrial Commission budget, really went through our earnings, the capital plan that you approved and the communique that you communicated with legislative leadership was very, very well received from my perspective. It really got ahead in a proactive way of, coming kind of piecemeal at more and more bank capital and dividends. We didn't face much of that at all this session. Very recently here, there was 25 million potentially being for the Teddy Roosevelt. I'll let Kelvin update when we get to him on kind of where that's at, because I knew that was kind of in flux, and we can talk about that. But that's really the only. And my understanding from prior sessions comparative to this one, that's a marked improvement. So I think we were right on with the capital plan, with it coming through Industrial Commission as the board, and with that dividend conversation and that communique. Our budget did not have much in it. When we look ahead, we expect deposits to kind of flatten out. There's a lot of downward pressure on state deposits because there's a lot of downward pressure on things like oil, and you got stripper tax, you got the gas issue, So when we look ahead, that deposit base that we entirely rely on, we look at it being relatively flat. Therefore, we're looking at our loan portfolio growing much less looking forward than what it did prior. And we've seen some huge double-digit growth We don't expect that moving forward. We kind of want to make that happen going forward in order to manage the risk profile. So our FTE account was really flat, and that's where it ended up. One thing that is really important here, and I said it in all the different testimony, but I don't think it's really caught on. When you see the type of productivity the Bank of North Dakota has seen, productivity improvement over a 4-year period, assets to employees, assets managed by employees was $40 million 5 years ago. It's $65 million today. That's huge. In fact, it's so huge that it starts to concern me that the risk profile may be giving too much. That's why I've been coming in here talking so much about risk. Looking ahead, we can stay flat on FTEs now, but if we see assets per FTE go up to say 70, 80 million, I'm going to be the first one to say our risk profile is, we are pushing the envelope too much, and we're going to have to start adding FTEs to the organization. We're good right now, and I think we're good over the next 2 years. But that's where we ended up. A few amendments that we had, some different things. So we are consolidating the administration of loans for the Rail Revolving Loan Fund to the Bank of North Dakota. The Department of Transportation will still decision these. We will just on the back end, because we have the loan systems, very economies of scale for us. We can handle these very, very easily. We did have the amendment in section 16 to where we can hold our participant loans as confidential. It's protecting the banks and credit unions that are on the front end of these things. It's matching up to their confidentiality. That seems to be going through pretty well. As well, and this is important, it didn't get talked about much, but we can hold our bond insurance and our cyber insurance coverage confidential. Ransom attacks on banks are going crazy. Banks are getting attacked on a daily basis. A buddy bank of mine in Kansas just paid $481,000 in a ransomware attack. You don't want to make that coverage public because then you will be even more of a target. So they'll know exactly what to ask you for ransomware on. So things like that. The Rebuilders Permanent Loan Fund, we worked on that to get some additional latitude for the governor to open up using that Rebuilders Permanent Loan Fund. A good example would be if there's a federal worker shutdown and we want to do a simple, paycheck loan program at a low interest rate to help them out in North Dakota, we would now be able to do that because we're able to get some of that language relaxed in that. In terms of the gas that Justin was in here talking about, that 120 million that you saw up there, just so you guys know, that is authorization to the guarantee program utilized by Bank of North Dakota. And that would allow the Pipeline Authority to borrow up to that 120. So that comes through the Bank of North Dakota, and we just want to make you aware of that. And then Section 21 in the PACE program. PACE has been probably one of the best programs out there, right? However, these deals are getting larger, they're getting more complex. And so what we got was, and this will be really, really powerful, for something that has substantial economic impact for a community, but where the community may not be able to come up with enough on the $500,000 match to go above that, we would now have the authority to do $1 million on top of the $500,000 without an additional match from the local community. So it allows us to put a little more horsepower into a substantially economic project in a community and not ask for that local community to foot that bill as well. So we think it's a nice move in the right direction. So that's what I have. Anything to add, Kelvin?
The only other thing that I think I would add is that one of the things that, and I know that Don had talked to the governor about this, is the lines of credit we're tracking that very closely. And I just talked to Representative Bigasall this morning, and we're going to get together with the approach chairs and kind of talk through that. Typically what's happened in the past is the lines of credit have been used to provide certainty for projects. So if Highway 55 or if Highway 85, if the money came in from the feds, they had the ability to tap a line of credit to match the federal funding. What we see this session is that the lines of credit are going to be accessed and used in this biennium. So if they decide they're using 85 to 120 million for the state hospital, that's construction's going to be 90% done in this biennium. And so there's lines of credit that as we're looking at it, it's about $300 million that would actually be utilized in this biennium. And so that's where we'll be coming back and asking for efficiency appropriation to pay those off. And so that's more than we have ever sort of had that we think may be used in biennium. So we're going to talk to legislative leadership about that and just make them aware that, okay, this isn't going to be like past sessions where it's a $10 million deficiency. These could be, much higher. So we want to make sure they account for that as they're thinking about their ending fund balance.
And in terms of capital, go ahead.
I mean, it's very possible it's 300 million.
Yes.
Like, it's not hypothetical, like they're.
Yeah.
And the line commitments have gone to $1.3 billion. And we've also got to manage unfunded commitments, which that is. Our capital, we've run capital stress scenarios, part of our capital plan. That a level is acceptable. We can manage that, but it is on the upper end of what is acceptable. I just want to leave you with that as well.
So that's above and beyond what they've already appropriated. Could potentially be another 300 million.
Yeah. So as they look at it, so I'll just use the state hospital, for instance, because not quite sure where it's fallen into, but part of the discussion has been, using 200 million from SIF and using a line of credit of 85 to some number. And if you look at, we looked at the construction plans, we've met with HHS and said, okay, how fast are you going to build this? Because, we've done these lines where it'll be certainty so they can do their bidding and all of that. In this instance, the hospital could be 90% built in 25, 27 biennium. But when we come back to the 27 session, it's going to be okay, 80 of this $85 million line has been advanced, and now, we're going to need to pay off that line. And so that's what we've been looking at, is the probability of, what lines could be drawn and the timing of those, because that is different than what we've done in the past. So yes, they could come back and have, 200 or 300 million that has been spent on lines of credit in the biennium that they need to pick up going into the 27, 29 biennium and pay off.
To future liabilities.
To future liability.
We don't want people to forget about.
Yeah.
And then I would like to end the legislative section with kind of my reflections. So you ask any bank CEO out there you ask them what 3 things will take down a bank. One is a run on your deposits or risk to your deposit base is number 1. Number 2 is a major credit quality event. And number 3 is activist shareholders. If you look at the banking industry last 100 years, those are the 3 things that cause banks to fail. We are not immune to that risk at Bank of North Dakota. If you look at our deposit base, when I look ahead, and I mentioned this, there's downward pressure on it, but there's also risk to that deposit base. The cash management idea that came out in the RBK study. Now that's moved to a much better place, but the original idea is still out there. And so I have to consider that as a strategic risk to the deposit base. And I've heard it as recently as last week, various individuals talking about that original RBK idea of taking bank deposits and putting them outside the state. We've got the natural gas, we've got the stripper tax issue, we've got spend levels, and we've got term limits coming. So when I look at all that, I look ahead, I say, well, I've put a major risk to the deposit base, not that they'll ever run, but that we may not be looking at a growth of the Bank of North Dakota strategy. We may be looking at a shrinkage of the Bank of North Dakota strategy. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but that's what we're strategically looking at. I say that to say this. That's part of the reason that as we look at fintech, why we're considering our top fintech priority being, should we look at diversifying our deposit base? And we're looking at that. We'll bring more back to you, but I just want to give you my reflections on kind of that overall, because it is a major point for the bank at this point. In terms of credit quality events, I want you guys are the board and you need to hear this. Our credit quality is deteriorating. Now it's still at a very manageable level, very manageable. However, we're watching it very, very closely because again, when you look ahead, is the pressure of the environment and the interest rates and everything likely to improve credit quality or deteriorate it? It's likely to deteriorate it further. So if we're already seeing some deterioration and we're in an environment that is not as healthy for quality credit, then we're looking at maybe, more of a heightened risk profile in that area. So we're watching that very, very closely. And the third is the activist shareholder. I truly just my mind equating it to private banking, where executive management, you and the advisory board, our board of directors, and the legislature are shareholders. Every group is critically important. You can't operate without one of them, but each group fulfills a very important purpose. And that is why I think with the capital plan, with the SMART plan, and moving forward, as I'm looking at things like how does the bank relate to the appropriations process or potentially procurement? What do we do when we look into this fintech space, which is going to require some different ways of thinking? I'm going to be continuing to lean more into the Industrial Commission as our board of directors to come to for oversight, decision-making on very strategic items. So I just want to give you those reflections on those three big risk areas because they're just that critically important.
What do our activists, what are the risks of activist shareholders for us?
So
$500 million run on line of credit every 2 biennia.
I mean, that's what it's, right? It's just that legislation coming in. And
that, and even this session, and this is kind of why my reflections are here now that I've been here 8 months, I've got a session under my belt. So in this session, we faced out of state correspondent banking that we were told you're going to do it. And we pushed back, said, you don't even understand the risk profile. We don't even understand gold and silver, digitization, hold of that, the risk profile there. So we faced a lot of, you are just going to do this. And I find myself in the interesting place of being responsible to protect and manage and run the Bank of North Dakota, and yet getting told from the shareholder group, this is what you're going to do. What happens when that occurs? And the risk profile is just way too much. Crypto was another one. We've got to understand that risk profile better. So that's why I think it's critical that we realize in the private market, there's a reason the shareholder group elects an independent board to oversee management. There's a reason for that. And it's so that the business can run as the business needs to run, all things considered. Does that
that's my question.
Yeah. I don't think anybody was necessarily in here in love with the cash management study as it was originally introduced. I will say we're going to do everything we can over the next 18 months to use it to educate some of our legislators about how cash management actually works for the bank in particular, but for state government. And I think that'll be more important with term limits coming into play.
Yeah.
Our vanguards, I don't know how your conversation went with Vigasaw, but I'm assuming he is more receptive to that than the general public of the legislature. And I think if it's here anyway, we're going to utilize it to try and educate them about it's not $20 million sitting in a checking account earning no money.
That's right.
There's a reason we have $4 billion in securities. There's a reason that these things exist, and it's different than a normal place. So we're going to try and do the best we can in that committee to do it. This is our backstop. On top of everything else it does, it's our backstop.
And Governor, I guess I would just follow up and just say, I think that, the action that the Industrial Commission took in communicating with leadership on the capital plan, this is my 5th session with the bank. On that front, this has by far been the best session of not having just people sit in committees and decide that they want to pull from banks' earnings. That has been a dramatic shift. To your question, Attorney General, I think that, I've had new legislators, talked about lines of sort of make that, well, we'll just take up a line and pay the bank back. And that's where I have the conversation about, okay, there's S&P ratings and that's not how it works. So I do think that overall communication as we move into the limits is going to be essential, and having, the Industrial Commission really serve as the board and provide those communications is going to be imperative going forward.
The other part I think is in the last couple of sessions, it's been throwing everything into the HHS and all of that. And this year, I think probably more than the money side of it is giving you guys like either a new direction, like gold and silver, digital assets, take over a school choice program.
Yeah.
Trying to expand your footprint, whether you want it to or not. And there's policy things not all new additions are created equally, right? Like if you have to hire 3 new FTEs in an existing subsection of your agency, that's a lot easier to do than standing up a brand new program that you've never run before. And I think it's a credit to you guys that they want you to have it, because usually they shop around to who they don't like and they get somewhere where it ends up.
Interesting.
or open.
Or open, yeah.
And then for the commission members behind tab 9 are the non-confidential Lake North Dakota Committee and Advisory Board minutes. And then we're ready to move into closed session.
Governor, I move that under the authority of the North Dakota Century Code, sections 6-0935, 44-0419.2, the Industrial Commission enter into an executive session for the purpose of Bank of North Dakota confidential business.
Second.
Roll call.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes. The commission is meeting in executive session pursuant to NDCC 6-09-35 and 440419.2 to consider those items listed on the agenda under the Bank of North Dakota confidential business. I'm laughing because I read the Century Code in two different ways. Only commission members, their staff, commission staff, and BND staff will participate in this executive session. Any formal action taken by the commission will occur after it reconvenes in open session. I remind commission members and those present in the executive session that the discussion must be limited to the announced purposes. This executive session is anticipated to last approximately 1 hour and will begin at 2:04 p.m.
The executive session has ended at 2:21 PM and the commission is reconvened in open session. During the Bank of North Dakota executive session, the commission discussed those loans listed on the agenda. A motion and a second were made for the approval of the four loans. Roll call.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Good job, Baker.
Good job on that, that plan.
Yeah, we'll report back on how.
I wish you were here as a host.
Well, and I'm a boy. Yep, so I'll have one of each. Yep.
During COVID, I remember.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Nobody's been harder on those two.
I know he's not so little anymore.
Right, I know they're all- we don't have open meetings.
Yeah.
See you. Bye.
Oh. Yep.
All right. Moving into, are we doing minutes now?
Next up, we've got the Industrial Commission Administrative Office items. For your consideration, we have the March 25th, 2025 Industrial Commission meeting minutes.
So moved.
Reluctantly second that.
Waiting for that since this morning. I was reminded that we had this meeting.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
That was good.
All right, the next item we have for you, as you know, Dave Floor, our Executive Director for the Housing Finance Agency, will be retiring mid-June. And so we have begun the process of finding his successor. The job was posted on April 11th. It will remain open until April 30th. We're working with HRMS on that. And so the action item that we have for you is directing me to put together the interview committee for the first round of interviews. And that interview committee would involve the assignment of somebody from each of the commission members, along with two additional members that would be from stakeholder groups that are connected to the Housing Finance Agency. And then directing me to move forward with that process.
So move.
Second.
I appoint Drew from my office.
Allow me to reciprocate.
Turns out,
Interesting.
well, no, there's three of us. You gotta go in a circle. Roll call.
Commissioner,
Yes.
Attorney General,
Yes.
Governor.
Yes.
And then the last item that we have for you is a legislative update. I'll turn that over to Jordan.
Well, Commissioners, our bill 2014, the amendment was adopted on the House floor today, but didn't get to the 14th order. So we'll see in the evening set or the late afternoon floor session, see if they take that up. But just a few highlights of any, a few of the changes or amendments. We have, as compared to the first half, additions. Yeah, and I won't touch on the ones that have already been mentioned from Justin or the bank or what Nathan mentioned, but for the Housing Finance Agency, that HIF number was bumped down to 20 million with 10 million for homeless still also. And then the 13.5 million for the rent stabilization fund. And then 1.2 million from HIF for the FTEs to pay for, to administer that. So that's where that's at. And
that's just the move out of HHS, right?
so the new program for them to stand up and to administer. On the 13.5 part on the rent side. For DMR, for reclamation specialists, there's language to use money from the abandoned well plugging reclamation fund to pay for a couple more reclamation specialists. That's something that's never been done before. That's what the House Government Ops Division decided to do. to add a couple more reclamation specialists that DMR was requesting. Use that abandoned well fund dollars. And so we'll see what how that goes in conference committee. But it was, I guess the idea of reclamation specialists was strongly pushed and supported by various parties. So that was their solution. And
Another thing I see in that though, is we're watching in other areas, about the only time you can get an FTE anymore is if you are using special funds or some other fund. And the problem is as much money, and I'll just use my department as an example. A lot of our licensing and registration, a lot of that money gets dumped into the general fund. We just ask to get money back out so that we can hire the inspectors. And then we got to fight that battle. And in the end, they keep the general fund money, make us go to special fund. And that thing's getting to the point where it gets used all in 1 year. We'll be doink in the second year. But I don't know how maybe we just need to start asking to have all of our special funds or all of our licensing fees, things like that, go into the special fund so we can actually do the work. But that's another example of what's happening.
I'm hopeful that there'll be, I mean, they cut basically all the new FTEs government-wide. I think their response is their argument would be, we have hired new people at a rate that's unsustainable over the last 10 years. I don't particularly even disagree with that. I hope after this first time through it, maybe they'll be a little more strategic about it. There are places that probably could get away with like losing some FTEs out of their base budget. And then there are other organizations. DEQ is a good example. If we have less people working at DEQ and less EPA involvement, that doesn't help anybody sometimes efficiency is more people, not less.
Yeah.
So we will try and also do that. And I think that's a good example, not the least of which you're taking money away from reclaiming from the reclamation fund that I think citizens expect to be utilized there to do that. But I'm hopeful we can not treat every single agency, whether it's a cabinet agency or an elected agency, equal, because they don't have the equal concerns. So.
And that is a great point.
It's been a very blunt force. It was a conscious decision by the legislature, this legislative session, to be incredibly skeptical of any new FTEs anywhere government-wide. I'm actually okay with that as long as they don't continue down that path, whether the need is there or not.
They also took away, they took away some that you weren't able to hire. And we have prosecutor jobs. We can't hire them right now. We don't have the money. They get paid $20,000 a year more up the street in the state's attorney's office. So they took them away because we haven't been able to hire. And we had one guy, I won't bore you with the whole thing, but I got it in the end. It wasn't like hostile action. I got it. It was easy picking. They're like, okay, we'll live without this. But every county is more likely to get a no when they call us saying we need a prosecutor to help second chair a big trial or something.
Well, and I'll say, because you won't say it for yourself, your agency is a perfect example. Like, if you can't compete with the Burleigh County State's Attorney's Office, it's not a great space to be to hire lawyers in the Attorney General's office. And we have to be a little more strategic about that.
And it's better now. We got equity last time. We got a little bit this time. We've been able to short up a little bit, but we're still among the lowest paid in the government.
But it also perpetuates the worst part of government. Get somebody hired whether they're qualified or not, because otherwise you worry about the appropriators taking it away from you.
Yeah, that's not a good. You're right about that.
That's not the right way.
That's not it.
It's not good government. I do agree. We have a lot of projects coming to the state. Their ability to have enough people to work on the modeling, to work on the permit, get it turned around so we can get those projects going is a big concern. And you're spot on, right with you. This just slows down the economy and hurts our communities.
By the way, from the private side too, some people keep complaining about DEQ or whatever not being out there. I'm like, quit poaching all their employees. The 3 guys that would do this are now working for you.
Great discussion, gentlemen. I was just gonna add too, as far as FTEs go, you know, the HFA has 8 new FTEs in here, but no general fund dollars. And that's a distinction that I think is important to make as you talk about, you know, looking at any FTEs where there were a couple discussions in committee even being kind of hard on the bank and their FTEs. And, you know, I wish that, you know, I think we all wish that when it comes to an agency that puts money into the general fund, that maybe they'd be treated a little differently as far as a for-profit business, but they're fine in the end. But like Housing Finance Agency, no general fund dollars. DMR, there are 5 new FTEs, 3 of them that is general fund dollars, but now the 2 that aren't. So I'll just mention that.
But like Nathan didn't have an admin. Like how you run DMR without an admin?
Jeez,
Like he didn't have one.
what'd they do?
I don't know.
Literally.
I was in Congress.
Don't blame me, I was in Congress.
A few other things to highlight for you. I think
God, that's weird.
Energy Authority, that Bill 2188 looks like it'll be going to conference committee. It's at 15 million now for grants and 40 million for loans. Of course, that number's fluctuated throughout the session, but I'm told that that number might get bumped down to 10 million for grants in conference committee, just with the general fund balancing that needs to happen. We'll see where that shakes out. Senate Bill 2256 on the Research and Tech Park Fund in Fargo, currently sitting at 10 million, going to conference committee. And I think those are some of the main highlights to touch for you.
2180. What was that about? Was that about people wanting to come in and speak at our meeting? Because we're a public meeting, it's not a public forum.
Wow, so that's been amended just for political subdivisions.
Okay. Because we got a lot of business to cover.
Yeah.
If we can hold a public forum someplace, but you know, everybody has our phone numbers, our offices, they can call and voice their concern.
In its original form, Industrial Commission, Land Board, they were all included, but it got amended out pretty early.
Okay. Yeah, that was a concern. Well,
Well, the only other business that we had is a couple of housekeeping items. For the May 22nd meeting, that's where we're hoping to hold the interviews for the finalist candidates for the Housing Finance Agency Executive Director. So we've got a 2-hour block in the morning that day, and then we'll have the regular meeting in the afternoon. And then the other thing we're working on is moving the Industrial Commission meetings to the morning. So I'll be working with your schedulers and we'll be able to start at the June Industrial Commission meeting.
And I would just, I talked to Doug about it, but I haven't talked to you about it, Drew. I just, you know, we've had how many meetings now since I've been governor? And I've had to ask to reschedule 2 of them a half hour earlier. I don't know how your schedule is. I think you and I talked about it. My schedule gets weird in the afternoons. If we do it at 9 in the morning, I don't like to try and, I don't want to have to reschedule. I don't want to have to call your offices. I think that's disrespectful. I think it's
not disrespectful. We understand what happens.
Yeah.
But if it works better this other way, I don't have any objection at all.
that was a lot better than where we're told it's this day and there's no latitude, no flexibility, only one way. So appreciate this. We can do this.
Yeah, it'll work.
And I don't think we have to I think our meetings will stay timely.
I like that.
Yeah.